Welcome to the session of What's Next for eduroam. My name is Chris Phillips. I am from Canary, the Canadian NREN, and I'm the technical architect of the Canadian Access Federation, as well as I'm the chair of the Global eduroam Governance Committee, and I'm going to be the chair for this session. So welcome, and it's great to see all the people coming in. I know we're starting bang on time, so keep on coming in. And we're going to have a number of presenters here. We're going to get started because there's 4 of us in a 90-minute slot. I'm going to be presenting for the first little bit a couple of pieces from the eduroam Governance Committee. And we'll be going on to Thomas from the Nicholas Copernicus University, and who's been involved with the eduroam CAD and some other topics. Stefan Winter, research and R&D engineer at Restena. And Gareth Ayres from Swansea Uni in Wales, and Raphael Valli, coordinator of research and development of Brazil's for RNP. And with that, I'd like to get started. So the next slide, please. I'll try not to feedback here. So eduroam v next. What's next for eduroam? This is not about trying to prescribe what is next for eduroam, but really to illuminate all the work that's been going on in the field. It's a great community, it's a vibrant community. There's 73 or 75 countries now with eduroam, and there's a lot of great things that are going on, and I hope that this session today and the session tomorrow give you a glimpse into some of that activity. One of the things that we often get queried about is what is the GEGC and what's our role and what's our purpose. We're part of the governance structure for eduroam. We're intentionally small for such a large span of institutions or regional operators in 74 countries. There's only 13 people in the GEGC. We work on managing the compliance statements and collection of the signed statements. But really, the last line here, recommending adjustments due to changes in technology or environment of eduroam. That's a real important piece. The compliance statement is important to have that commitment from the regional operator, but keeping track of what's going on with the technology and the changing landscape of wireless is a big thing. I had a challenge of what to put first, whether it's what we did in the second term or who were the third term eduroam, your GEGC members. And I'm going to call upon a couple of people. If you just want to stand up, if you see your name on the screen here, we have a couple of the GEGC in the audience already. Just go ahead and stand up. But you can applaud them if you like too. That'd be great. So we have a good chunk here. This is how we roll up 75 countries up into this group, and we're going to be talking about how do we evolve eduroam and how does the GEGC, how we would like to see things unfold. I'm just a messenger in this message. I'm not the only person stating it. So there's not a lot, there's a bit of change in the Africa side of things, and Stefan moving into the non-voting technical expert, and welcome Scott for the EU side of things. And what has the GEGC done in the last 2 years? The GEGC is formed for a period of 2 years and refreshes or phoenixes every 2 years. What happens, we approved 11 new countries. The Latin America Roaming Confederation has emerged, which is great. The other challenge is, the other side of the coin is what happens when you have something like Heartbleed. When you have a service that spans so many countries, a security event as worldwide as that is a significant thing. And I think it's important to mention something like this because there was a very great coordinated effort, and I think we learned a lot from that. We also have an interest in growing the presence of eduroam in our regions. And we worked very closely with the rechartering of the Task Force Mobility and Network Middleware, or otherwise known as TF Mobility. And that's a place that we see a lot of evolution with eduroam. I'm going to try to close off. I think this is my last slide here. eduroam needs a place for that international water cooler for people to gather around, and the GGC is not just the one place to do that. And there's been a vacuum of where to do this with eduroam, and people were trying to find their way, and mobility presented an opportunity here to have an advisory role to the GEGC, because those 13 people, or those rotating 13 people in the GEGC, certainly don't represent the depth and the breadth of talent that are in those 75 countries. So the mobility list and this environment gives us a forum or to springboard the knowledge and the space. So my call to the community and those on the stream as well and the archive is to join us in TF Mobility, and if you're going to get involved with eduroam or you're looking for projects, that's your starting point, and we really would love to hear from you. We're going to be looking at setting up some virtual meeting tools. We've already had a virtual meeting instead of an in-person one, and we're going to try in a couple of different formats to really stimulate that. If you want to take a little bit more depth into this, take a look at the mobility list in the new charter. And with that, I'd like to move on to our first presenter. Come on up, Tomas. Thank you. Do you want the mic, or we want the stand? Okay.
Hello and welcome thank you for coming to our presentation. This is a report on some joint work that we've done both in Giant and in the sub-project of Giant called Sense. Our main focus is our tools for making eduroam even safer and more reliable than it is now, even though we all agree that it is perfectly safe and reliable, but there maybe are still some weak points that we can cover. We will start with sharing some thoughts about privacy aspects of eduroam, but our main focus are the support tools that we would like to present. The two of them, one called ePlab, the other a radius test within the eduroam CAT, and we will also share some results from our own testing of devices that we've done within the Sense project. So let's start with the privacy aspects of eduroam, and from the user perspective, the question, how can I, the user of eduroam, be in danger? Well, first of all, I want to repeat that by design, eduroam is perfectly safe. So, but unfortunately, any safety can be broken by negligence, and therefore if you are an end user and you have a device which is broken by design, or if you neglect to configure it correctly, you may be in some sort of a danger. It must be realized that anybody can set up his own wireless network, and there's nothing stopping him from calling it eduroam. Therefore, being a user, you may encounter such a network, and okay, if you do, should you care? Well, you should care if your authentication credentials, like your typically username and password, can be intercepted by somebody else. And if those credentials are used for some other applications, as it often happens, then it may be quite bad for you. The other thing is that the internet traffic that you are generating could be monitored by an untrusted network. Whether this is a problem or not, this depends pretty much on the user. We are after all using hotspots and not really caring about this. So I'm just putting this as a, let's say, side remark rather than a real problem. What are the safeguards against these possible security problems? Well, essentially, they are what I started with. Your device should be, first of all, capable of being secure, and secondly, if it is, it must be configured correctly. And it sounds like an obvious thing after all these years of eduroam, but we keep repeating this because we are still hearing that some eduroam admins tell the users, oh, it's easy to configure eduroam, you just neglect everything, you just put in your username as password. This is not the right way to go, and we want to keep stressing on it. The other thing that we've met testing things are that the devices, it's not only important that they are configured properly. It's also important that they should give the user proper warnings, and they should not try to do stupid things, as sometimes happens. So what are the typical issues that the eduroam user could encounter? Well, first of all, it's the server not responding, either due to a possible network connection problem, or the server simply being down. So what can the user device do then? The user device knows that it's not talking to the home server of the user. Therefore, it's really no sense asking the user for credentials, which is, unfortunately is something that we often see. And even more importantly, it definitely should not clear stored user credentials and ask for new ones, because that's not, at this level, it doesn't make any sense. Another possibility is that home server is responding, but the network is not allowing access. That can be due to really very many reasons. One of them being that the user perhaps has changed his password using some other application, and the device has still the old password stored in. Therefore, the device hasn't really got that much choice in this case. It has to ask for credentials, possibly because of the new password needed to be put in. And the final of these typical things, as I see them, is that the server is responding, but the information it's providing within its certificate does not match what's stored in the user device. So there's a good chance that this is a rogue eduroam network set up by somebody to maybe just steal the user's credentials. In such a case, the device should definitely not attempt authentication, by which I mean sending credentials to that server. And if the user insists, it should still warn the user that this is a really bad idea to continue. Some less typical issues that could come up: the server certificate could be expired. This is a simple thing to detect on the user end, on the user device end, and well, good chance that this is simply an error on the home server administrator, but you should never trust an expired certificate, so the device should simply treat it as if there was no connection. And the other thing, you could encounter a revoked certificate. This is something I'm not going to expand on due to the lack of time that we have, but it is, I think, an interesting point, not really covered by any of the devices that we've seen. And in certain cases, like the heartbleed thing, for instance, it would be very useful if devices could react to revoked server certificates. So our main part of the talk is presentation of those tools. The first one, ePlub, is a playground mainly used for device testing. So we are focusing on the end user and on how well the user device can be configured. The other, the radius test from CAT, is just an addition which has been there for a long time, but it has been recently expanded by us, and it checks the other end of the picture. It checks the server settings and how essentially it is an open access radius server to which you can connect your access point, and then you can check your device connecting to this access point and using the radius that you provide. What's not so usual about it is that with a single click of a button, you can change the behavior of this radius server from being perfectly configured to being non-perfectly configured or even completely broken. So in this interface, as you see here, you just change the scenario, and what happens in the background is the routing from the proxy that's the radius server that's visible to you is changed to another server that realizes this another configuration scenario. Our radio servers run in debug mode, so if you are interested what's happening on the server side, you can get access to it. The output is filtered per realm, which essentially means per ePlub user, and you can look at the output by either a packet presentation as seen on the slide, or you can even get a full debug load, debug output that you can download with a click on the top of the screen here. So what are the usage scenarios of ePlub? Essentially, we see them as being in two groups. One is just device testing, which we think we should have a very wide range of users interested in. So if you get a new device, it's easy for you to check that the device can be actually configured for doing .1x, and then you can check how resilient this device will be against credential theft attacks. You can see if the device can handle things like expired or revoked certificates. And maybe in some cases, a user can say that his new device does not connect to your real eduroam network. Then perhaps you could try if it will connect to a network controlled by ePlub. If that's so, then perhaps there's something wrong with your server that this device has suddenly found out, yes. If, on the other hand, ePlub does not connect, there's a good chance that there's simply something wrong with the device. The other group of scenarios are supplicant development and testing. Of course, there are not that many supplicant developers, but we actually already got three use cases. One is the Android app, about which you will hear in the next talk. The other is the Arnes Link, which has a presentation in this conference. And finally, the WPA supplicant has been also using ePlub for some testing. A very quick glance through the ePlub pages. We have what we call fixed configs, which are, let's say, for the lazy users, just some basic scenarios. You don't really get the output of it, but if you don't want to configure anything, this is something that you can use. But the real strength of ePlub comes from doing your own account configuration. To this, you have to authenticate. You can use either a federated account from a federation which is connected to Edugain, or you can use a Google account. You can use all sorts of credentials supplied by ePlub, so either username and password or a certificate for eTLS. We also have utilities for taking notes of your tests, and you have an eduroam cat hidden behind that you can use for automated device configuration. And the real thing is the testing console, which gives you access to two implementations of radio servers. It allows you to choose from two setups of server certificates, and then select one of many scenarios, of which, well, exactly 18 of these. I'm not going to describe what these scenarios do, except for saying that they will implement things like good scenarios, bad scenarios, and so on, and so that you can check your device in many cases. If you click on this more info link next to each of the scenarios, you will find out what the scenario does and what result you can expect. And the final thing about ePlub are the notes. We found out that it is somewhat tricky to keep track of what you've been already testing, so you've provided an interface for you to take the notes. You can also share the notes with everybody. It's quite easy to use, and if you start using it, I'm sure you will appreciate it. Now I will pass on to Stefan for describing some test results.
Yeah, Hello. So you have now heard what eBlab can do, and you could now rush out of your seats and go home and test your favorite supplicant. It just so happens that this is a bit of a cumbersome task to do. So I see nobody getting up. So maybe somebody else has to do it. And when we were in the SENSE project, we actually realized, yeah, we should go farther than providing this reference platform to test against. We should actually go out into the field and do those tests with a number of supplicants out there. So one of the work packages we had was the supplicant assessment. We were supposed to define quality measurement metrics for various supplicants in the field and to assess these supplicants against all those metrics we defined. Of course, the reference platform to test against for all the technical things was the eBlab. We had more things to test, so we had altogether 32 weighted criteria in 3 categories. So UI, how is the user interface, how reasonable are the error messages which come up in the various failed scenarios, does the supplicant have all the features we want a supplicant to have, and does it finally do all the security related things correctly, or at least mostly correctly. We chose 7 supplicants to actually do those tests, and this means what it actually means for computer scientists to go out in the field. Actually, he goes into a computer store and buys some nice gadgets. So some of these things we had on stock, some had to be bought. And from this list, you also see that, yes, I was the one person who actually bought a BlackBerry device in 2014. So all the best for BlackBerry. And I did it only for scientific research purposes. I don't actually use it. Now it's just sitting on my desk, but, well, it could. Anyway, we tested all those 7 supplicants. That was quite a batch of work to do. Our original plan was to award a quality label for the better end of the range and just say, okay, we have a certain bar to cross, and this is a good supplicant. However, as we were finishing our task, we realized the air is really thin up there. So we had 2 supplicants which passed all the critical and major security checks that we have set up, and still failed in the minor ones, but those we didn't consider too critical. And we only had 1 supplicant which achieved a integer score of more than 50% of the points we wanted to give to them. So a quality label where just 1 supplicant comes out as a quality supplicant is more like advertising. And the quality label basically fell short at this point. So the OSX supplicant was the best one we encountered in terms of these criteria. But yeah, it is just the one single thing on top. Now, one war story here. I don't want to show you the hundreds of, well, Excel and calculation sheets with all those scores. One interesting thing we learned, there are subtle differences even inside a vendor, and people sometimes just get it wrong on the supplicant implementation side. So when you have a macOS device and you connect to a server with an unexpected certificate, you get a warning, this is a new certificate. Do you want to trust it, yes or no? If you do the same on iOS, you get the same dialog, and it also asks you, do you want to trust it, yes or no? There is a subtle difference between the two. If you do it in macOS X, it tells you on the end of this very long property list of what the certificate is, the SHA-1 fingerprint of the certificate is this and that. The otherwise identical looking iOS dialog shows you properties within the certificate, but simply misses out on this last line, and the SHA-1 fingerprint is. So you cannot verify fingerprints on iOS. It's the same vendor, it's almost the same operating system. It is the same dialog coming up, it's the same workflow. It really looks like just somebody forgot to printf this last line about what the fingerprint of the certificate actually is. So that was a bit depriving. We're really depressed with how things came out here, and some things really can go wrong in a subtle way, and you affect millions of users of it. I mean, this is iOS. That's quite a popular supplicant. So as a last note, and that's my last slide here before I hand back to Tomasz, of course, when we realized things go wrong in supplicants, we filed bug reports against all those implementations we have. I'm now a fan of bugreporter.apple.com and also of the Google issues things. The more depressing thing, besides just those deficiencies, is that when we submitted those bug reports, vendors typically didn't react at all, or reacted only very, very slowly, and didn't really care to fix the problems. And for me as an engineer, I'm at a point where I have to say, okay, we've gone all the way we can go. We've shown people with easy to reproduce scenarios with this reference platform that something is wrong here. And as an engineer, we can just say, yeah, that's it, so fix it. we don't get any further with that. So my question basically to the audience, to everybody is, how can we get these vendors to actually care about these bugs and fix them? How do we have to incentivize them so that actually something happens? Obviously, just somebody filing a bug report is not enough. And with that, I hand back to Tomasz.
So back to the testing, and this time the other end of the picture. It's the server testing. It is important that your server is configured correctly. Even subtle problems can cause problems with user devices. And if you go towards what is called dynamic peer discovery, there are even more mistakes to be made. So the radius tests within eduroam cat are allowing the eduroam admins to verify that their servers are actually behaving as they are supposed to. So radius tests were in the eduroam cat forever, you could say, but now they have a new look, and they also have a lot more functionality. So one thing that we do are the tests run through the real eduroam infrastructure. So we start from the top level servers of eduroam and then go to the realms, and we check that. Mainly we check the server certificates, whether they are okay, and whether they have all valid settings in them, and so on. So if you want to, you can expand on the certificate to make sure that this is really, that what you are seeing is really your certificate. And this is how some of the test results can look. The first is all great, yes. This does not happen so often, you might be surprised. The other is not so perfect. Some warnings have been found. And the third case is something is seriously wrong. What in this case it is that your cat profile has a different root CA configured than is sent by your server. So if you have that kind of a problem, you can be almost sure that your users will not be able to connect if they use cat profiles. The other is the connection tests run for dynamic peer discovery. Here, we essentially just connect the TLS setup and see if the connection from servers that you are supposed to accept do work, and the ones that you're supposed to reject do not. And finally, and this is really the last slide, it's the tests, the real authentication tests that you can perform with this interface. The good thing about it is that if you have configured, for instance, 5 different authentication methods, the 5 different EAP methods, with a single test, you can test all of them. And if you maybe have misconfigured just one, it might be not so easy to spot, especially if it's a more exotic one. And with this test, you will go through all of them without any need of configuration. And I cheated about that being the last slide. This is the last slide. It's the message that we would like to give to the eduroam admin. It really matters, first of all, that you configure things correctly, and it also matters what you tell your users. So try to do the good thing. We will have demos, meetings on Wednesday and Thursday. So if you would like to know more, come to us, and we'll be happy to share.
That's great. Thank you very much. Next up, as you can tell, we could take maybe one question. We chose a model where we wanted to present more information in a tighter form, but that means we're feeling a little bit rushed. But does anyone have one question for Thomas and Stefan? Going. I guess one question I would have is could this be part of eduroam cat and having Radius server admins test their own servers?
like an eduroam cat?
You mean ePlub, yes? Well, this is an idea that we are playing with and actually presented at TF and I'm still looking for time to write up the idea and send it to the eduroam or list, but that's what we are thinking of, yes.
Excellent, thanks very much. All right, next, Gareth. Welcome. And do you want that or this? Oh, it's up to you. All right.
Thank you. Hello. Okay. Hi, my name's Gareth, and I'm going to be presenting our work today, which came out of the same project, the Sense project. So the big part of that work was the development of a eduroam cat Android app. So I'm presenting work that comes out of that group with Stefan and Thomas. I'm just going to skip past this slide, but if there's anybody, if I refer to any terms that people don't understand throughout the presentation, and either stop me or give me a shout after. So the big problem with that we tried to tackle and try to improve was getting devices connected to eduroam. So particularly Android devices, this is what I focused on. But one of the big things with 802.1x based networks is, as Thomas was saying, they're secure. There's not a security issue, but if you're not set up correctly, they can be insecure for you as a user. So configuring the device correctly is really important with 802.1x networks, but then configuring a device properly is not always easy. So two of the big things which, from experience, people skip past when they configure 802.1x networks, particularly eduroam, is they don't install the certificate authority certificate or set the server names. So these checks, if you don't put these bits of configuration into your supplicant, this enables possible attack on your eduroam connection. So as Thomas said, this doesn't make eduroam or 802.1x networks insecure. It just means that your particular implementation is insecure. So this is a problem in the private sector, perhaps, where devices are managed and fully configured from AD or something like that, where certificates and a profile is pushed out. That's not such a big issue. But in the academic world, where we've got a lot of BYOD devices, lots of students and academic staff who want to quickly connect, it becomes a real big problem. So there's a burden on users where they have to configure their supplicant, to configure their device to connect to eduroam. It's complicated for users to do. And also, as Thomas was saying, some supplicants don't even provide an interface to fully configure your device. So connecting eduroam devices is secure, but it's not always easy. So making it easy and secure at the same time is a challenge, but one that we're trying to tackle. So there are configuration tools that already exist to configure your device. eduroam cat, I hope everyone here is probably aware of, and that's free, and it provides an Android tool now and Windows tools and the Apple mobile config files. And these are really good ways of making sure that your device is configured correctly, and it's probably something you all use. And there's other supplicant configuration tools, some you pay for, like Express Connect and SecureW2. And Apple, to be fair, have done a real good job with the mobile config files, which allow you to push enterprise settings to iPads and MacBooks. And you can configure your eduroam profile and push certificates and things like this to your device using the mobile config files. And that's kind of a good example of how to do that. And SU1X is a Windows supplicant configuration tool I wrote years ago, which I use in Swansea University and in some other universities around the world. It's free and they use it. So eduroam cat has been around now for a few years and is being used, as we know, by lots of institutions and very successful. And it allows you to download, so as an administrator of an eduroam institution, you can configure the settings you want your users to have and upload your certificates and perform tests and these things on the eduroam CAT website. And once you've configured everything, it provides an interface for your users to download configuration tools, Windows tools originally in the mobile config file. And then you can point users at eduroam CAT to host those tools locally. But then when we started looking at the Android implementation of this, it became a bit of an issue in the model that's used to distribute applications to Android is different to Windows. So with the eduroam CAT Windows application or the SUNX Windows configuration tool, for example, you could compile that yourself from source, or you could download a precompiled version which is packaged with all the settings you need for your institution already. So it would have your certificate authority certificate or your TLS user certificates. It would be all packaged, and all your configuration settings would all be packaged in that for you. And Windows will happily run any executable. So that's fine. You can host it on a website anywhere, and you can download it. Users can download it, and you can give it to users in USB keys. You can even sign the executable if you wanted to for extra security, but either way, Windows will run any executable file. So that model doesn't work anymore with Android, because Android doesn't by default allow you to run any application on the device. It has to be an application that's delivered via one of the Play stores. So either the Google Play Store or maybe some other application repository. There are a few others. But you have to get it from a trusted source. So that's the big difference. But that poses new problems that we needed to tackle then with eduroam. So you couldn't have one Android app for every institution, because if everyone had their own app and you had a Play Store with 20,000 Android eduroam connection apps, it would be confusing for users again. So the kind of goal was that there would be one eduroam configuration app in the Android Play Store. And the problem is that if there's one app, it needs to be able to discover each user's institution's settings. So if I'm from Swansea University in the UK, if I downloaded the eduroam app, it can't have a generic settings to use. It has to have Swansea's specific settings, including their certificates and support information and then some of these other nice things. So to do that, there needed to be a way of pushing that information to the app that institutes, different IDPs could define. So you can define all your configuration information separately, instruct your users to download the app, and then pull in, using the app, the necessary information to configure them according to the way that someone at Swansea University should be configured to use eduroam. And the way to do this was epconfig files, which was largely through the work Stefan and members of the group did to define this XML format to describe the necessary information to configure a supplicant. So it includes things like the EAP methods used and the certificates and support information. I'll show you an example of one in a minute. So this epconfig file was also presented to the IETF as an internet draft by Stefan. So it's something that's not just eduroam potentially as well, something that could be used for any kind of epconfig for 802.1x networks. So this is an example of the XML file. So I've highlighted in green some of the more interesting bits. But essentially, this XML file, this epconfig file, contains all the information that a supplicant requires to securely configure itself to connect to eduroam for a particular institution. So this is Swansea University's example. So you can see the EAP method and type 25. You can see the server-side credentials tag with where the certificate would be and the server IDs. And the inner authentication method, which would be MS-CHAP-v2 probably for Swansea, and the outer identity. So also, not just the EAP information that's necessary to set up that connection, it also contains some nice information which would be useful to kind of user interface of the supplicant to present to users if there's a problem, support information, location information, terms and conditions that the user has to agree to. So these are the kind of extra bits of nice information which can be included into the epconfig file then that the supplicant could choose to use or not. So in the Android application, it does choose to use these. So the model now is that a user has to install the Android eduroam cat app. And then once they've installed this app, it's pretty much an app that doesn't do much until you've got a config file. So it's a bit of a tricky situation that you have to have the app first, which is from the Play Store, which requires internet connectivity, to then get an epconfig file which will then configure your device to securely connect to the internet with eduroam. So that kind of chicken and egg thing I'll come on to in a minute. But this is a screenshot from the app which kind of shows what happens when you click on an epconfig file in a browser or in an email or whatever on an Android device. It launches the app, it reads in the XML, it displays it in a nice way that the user will hopefully understand so they can read it and validate to themselves that it's the correct epconfig file and it's for them. And then they can choose to discard it or install it. So this is another part of the app, and this bit is something that it shows the user that they have configured their device correctly, fully, securely to use eduroam. So this is the series of green and white ticks. So if you've installed a epconfig file and configured the device correctly, all these go green. It shows you what those different things are. It says your ep methods are set correctly, your outer identity, your anonymous identity is set correctly, the certificate authority certificates installed and the server IDs are correct. So it's validating to a user that their device is configured securely and it should be a fully secure connection. It hopefully will have been easier for the user than doing all this themselves manually. And also, if the first time that you run this app, if you're on a eduroam connection that you've done via the user interface in Android, clicking settings and then clicking on Wi-Fi and just clicking eduroam and putting your username and password in, which is what the vast majority of people obviously do at the moment, it would show a series of red crosses where those green ticks are to kind of get across the message to people that their device may be connected to eduroam, which is a secure wireless network, and they are successfully connected, but because they haven't gone and done things like install a certificate authority certificate, they're not completely secure the way that they're connected. So the app kind of tries to reinforce that message of doing it properly, making it easier, but also doing it properly. So as I kind of hinted at, there's an issue where you've got to have internet access to get the app, and there's no way around that. One way would be to have a kind of setup network like a lot of people use now to push tools to users and poke holes in it to play the Google Play website and some of the Google URLs, and then you can enable them just access to get the app that way. Or you can just make the assumption that like most mobile phones have got data connectivity when they're outside roaming around, and you can get the app that way, and then once you've got the app, then configure eduroam. But there's this additional step which is admittedly confusing, where once you've got the app, then you have to go and find something else. So you may have an email attachment with the config file in, or it may be a URL you have to click on, but you have to have the app installed to make that useful, and then you have to, once you've installed the app, go and click on the config file. And this is unfortunately down to the nature of the way Android works and this model of pushing apps to people, and only being able to have one generic app that needs to be configured essentially. But it posed a question which I'm hoping we've potentially got a solution for, of being able to automatically discover the configuration file. So it's the next step, the points 4 and 5, where you need to go and find the config file after you've installed the app and then click in it, and then the app launches itself again, and then it installs the correct settings. That bit that extra step would be taken away, so that users will only need potentially to run the app. And solution, I've kind of given it a name, may not need a name, but sub-configuration automatic discovery. And it's just come about from the very similar process of the WPAD process of discovering web proxy configuration details, a similar kind of process. So there's a few ways of, I kind of thought this may be possible. And I'm kind of presenting them today to the group as a series of potential ideas. I'm not saying that they're all good ideas, and I'm hoping it'll start a discussion and that we could then move on to decide as a group that it's worth implementing into the Android app, and that the security considerations I come on to it's still worth doing it even with them in mind. So the kind of assumption that you have to make is that a device has got network connectivity to be able to download the app, and if it's got network connectivity to download the app, then potentially that network connectivity can also be used to discover the config file. So 3 potential solutions I initially thought, as a group, we thought would be possibilities is DNS lookup. So it would be some way of the device doing some sort of DNS lookup and then discovering the config file. Realm lookup. So the user's got to enter the username at some point. So there's some information there that could be used to potentially discover the config file. And most Android devices, if not all Android devices, are context aware to locations, so they understand where they are roughly. Even if they haven't got GPS, using network, or like here, you connect to the wireless and the Android's got a match of different access points to different locations, so it's got some idea roughly where you are, even if it's just down to the city. So the DNS lookup idea is assuming you're connected to the network, a setup network or 3G or 4G, this would potentially allow you to kind of do some sort of lookup. So like the WPAD process looks up wpad.domain to find a WPAD config file, potentially a scad.domain lookup to discover the config file. So realm lookup, the user enters their username, and I'm thinking maybe you could append something or prepend it to the swansea.ac.uk, the realm part of a username, and then try and do some sort of lookup to discover the config file that way. Or the way that I've got most hope for is the location awareness way. So because most devices are, as I said, location aware, you could potentially, if you know your location and you've got some network connectivity, use some sort of system to query or some other repository of config files, or query something to discover the config. So because the eduroam cat app is generic to eduroam, and there's cat.eduroam.org, which is a repository of most institutions' configurations, then there's a great potential solution there where the app can just talk via, there's an API on cat.eduroam.org which allows you to talk to the back end and request certain information. So there's potential there to do that, to talk to use the location awareness along with cat.eduroam.org to query that repository of configurations and discover config file without having to click anything. So if you use the website, you'll see this is the implementation on the website, which is location aware as well, using GeoIP. So I think users would go to the website, they'll load up, they'll get presented with this screen which uses their IP address at the time to give them a rough location of where they are. So I did this on cat.eduroam.org from Swansea, and it's listed the nearby institutions that have configured themselves on cat.eduroam.org and put the configurations there. So this is an example of it. So I started to implement this into the Android app, and I've only done a proof of concept because because it may not be something we want to do yet. I don't know for certain if it's a good idea, but I've kind of implemented a proof of concept, and I'll show you a screenshot in a second. And I could potentially make that available to people, obviously not through the Play Store, because it's still very much just an idea, but maybe via, just I can send you the app to run if you, or whatever, but have a word with me if you want to try. So this is a quick screenshot of the proof of concept. So ignore the top bit. I was doing this literally downstairs an hour or two ago, just to get the locations nearby to where we are in Porto. I was connected on my tablet, which I deleted the configuration for, so I manually configured, so you could see there's some red text there saying things are missing. This is what I was saying about earlier on, trying to make people aware that they may be connected to eduroam, but they're not connected in a fully secure way. And then the bit at the bottom is the IDP and nearby bit is kind of a very basic test of it that I implemented. And essentially, it's using the location that Android's aware of. It's talking to the CAT website, querying some API calls to get the Android configuration for the nearby institution. So it's just looking for what's near you at that time, and then providing a link, which when you click on would launch that screen we've seen earlier on where you get a list of the configuration to install or discard. So I've just noticed they're not ordered properly. But the bottom one is obviously, I'm hoping, a nearby university. You're probably thinking there's some security considerations about this. So there's potential for people to, provide fake epconfig files as part of this discovery. And this isn't really a new problem. It's exactly the same as if you're giving people configuration executables, that could potentially be intercepted. And so this isn't really a new problem, but it's one where we will have to face. But the epconfig file doesn't really, unless you include a user certificate in it, it doesn't contain any information which, like passwords or anything, the user inputs that. So I'm hoping it's not that serious a consideration concern at the moment, but there's the potential to sign epconfig files, which is, I think, something that the Sense project has been looking at to kind of add a bit of validity to these epconfig files, that like the mobile config files can be signed. The other issue is that obviously people could accidentally discover the wrong config file. So if a user comes to this conference and for some reason has never used eduroam before and thinks, oh, I should have configured eduroam, and then they launch the eduroam app from the Play Store, and it presents them with the list of nearby universities which they're not from, and they click the wrong one, then obviously they'd be configured for Porto University instead of where they were meant to be configured. But I'm hoping that the branding, if you provide a list with logos which are available and specify the name of the university, then that will stop most people clicking the wrong institution. And there's only so much that can be done anyway to help people. So future work, as I was saying, I welcome all feedback on whether you think this new feature for the Android app's a good idea. I think it's worth defining a bit better and working on potentially. And I think it will make the whole process of the Android eduroam CAT app a lot quicker and simpler for people. The SCAD idea isn't just necessarily for Android. It can also be implemented into the OS X version or an iPhone version or a Windows version of a sub-configuration tool. The iOS doesn't allow you to configure the wireless interface, but the mobile config files that we probably already use are good anyway. So on top of that, the SCAD would just help people to discover the mobile config file potentially, but then whether that's a necessary step or not, I'll leave open to discussion. So, like I said, any questions, let me know after if you want to have discuss anything, or if you've got time now, maybe.
Yeah, we do have time. So go ahead and take the mic over there. Thanks very much. I think that's really interesting. That's been a big piece to fill into the eduroam offering, and that is something to do with Android devices. So maybe I'll ask Thomas or Stefan, is the Android configuration, not necessarily the EAP one that we saw in the last one, is the Android configuration on eduroam CAT right now? I think so, eh? Yeah, so that just recently went up maybe in the last couple of weeks?
1 month ago.
Okay. Maybe if you can provide some commentary on that, I think others would like.
Yes, so we launched the new version of eduroam CAT 1.1 sometime end of May. So from that moment on, the Android support for the config files was online. We had launched the Android app on the Play Store a bit before that, but since it didn't have config files to work with, we decided to make this a soft launch and just let it linger there. And we have now used those first couple of weeks to get some experience. Does the app actually work? How do people receive it? Do they like it? And so on. So now that we're fairly confident we have a good working tool, we might do some more promotion inside Giant in some of the NA activities to make the world better aware that this is now live in production.
Tuesday, May 26th, says Miro, who has his finger on the pulse of eduroam Cat. Gareth, some institutions try to go to a single SSID for eduroam, and the chicken and egg problem is an interesting thing. If in the download from the Play Store, have you seen people trying to cordon that off on an unrestricted SSID? Do they have to open up 19 different IP addresses to the Google Play Store? Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I've actually got a list. I've proposed a list of what's needed to open up the Play Store to a captive portal setup network, and it is quite a big list, unfortunately. And there's a smaller subset of that list you can do, which opens it up functionally, but breaks some of the other functions of the Play Store. It's a choice you'd have to make if you tried to go that way, but it is possible to open up all of the Play Store without opening up Google services such as Google Mail, and then making a captive portal network a functioning network. So it is possible.
Oh, great. That's excellent. That's excellent. And I think, Raphael, you're next. We're doing pretty good for time. Does anyone have any questions? Sorry, Gareth, but anyone have any questions for Gareth before he comes off the stage?
It's just a bit of a pain to download APK files from the Play Store. I mean, if you know what you're doing, you can just install the app directly from the APK. Is that available from the site itself?
I don't think it is on the CAT site.
It'd be a good idea to make it available, I guess.
Yeah, we certainly could. You'd have to configure the device to allow it to run untrusted sources, but certainly a possibility. Yeah.
All right, Raphael. The stage is yours, and I hope you guys see a theme for some of the things that we're talking about server-side things, about the client side, and I think we're going to hear about some of the quality of service monitoring side. So do you want the mic or this one? All right, no problem.
Can you hear me? Hello? Okay. So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Rafael. I'm a R&D product manager at RNP, the Brazilian Anybrand. I will present here the Coliseu management system based on quality of service and quality of experience for wireless networks. It's a work developed at Federal University from Rio Grande do Sul in partnership with RNP. So, the agenda includes the presentation of WG Coliseu, the team goals and the context of the work, the prototype that was developed in the first year, and this year's roadmap and the opportunities for the community. WG Coliseu is a work group from RNP work groups Programme. This Programme aims to develop collaborative projects with Brazilian research community that intend to demonstrate the feasibility of network protocols, service and applications. In the first year of the project, the Coliseu working group developed a mobile application and a web application that I will show to you in the next slides. First of all, I want to present the team. The team is led by Cristiano Wolff at Federal University of Rio Grande do Sul. He is assisted by Jürgen Rochal, and the team has also the collaboration of Professor Lisandro Granville, and I work as I said, as the R&D project manager at RNP. And the project has also the participation of doctorate, masters and undergraduate students from universities at the south, in Brazilian south region. So the prototype that the group developed aimed these two main goals. Analyze the quality of experience of wireless network users using RNP's points of presence as infrastructure for routing data. So this main goal concerns about quality of experience, the QoE. And the second goal is to create a distributed system for collecting and monitoring the quality of service of the wireless network. So the second goal concerned about the QoS. The Coliseu main idea is to move the monitoring system from the core of the network to the edge of the network. So as most of monitoring applications, they run at the core elements at the network, Coliseu is concerned at the end user devices. So we use the concept of mobile cloud computing to gather this information and forward this information to a centralized centralized application that will gather all this information and present it to the network. It will be presented to the network administrator. So first, I'm going to present the applications and then what's under each one of these applications. This is the mobile application that we developed in the first year. We have a couple of screens here. The first one, actually this is only the menu, okay, the first one. The second one is the review screen when users can rate the wireless networks, so you can give grades based on your experience, okay? And you can also make specific comments on the network. And this one is the local scanning screen, so we can now choose a network based on quality of experience from the users, not only based on the signal strength that we regularly use in our mobile phones. And this other screen shows the graphics of QoS measurements. So we have Persona tools implemented in the mobile app so that we can measure round trip time and TCP and UDP uplink and downlink. And the last screen shows a heat map so that the users can see the wireless coverage based on also on the user experience. Okay, now the management application is the centralized entity that gather all the information that the users get through its mobile device. It supports, as the agent, it supports authentication, but sorry. In the management app, we already use federated authentication. We use Brazilian Federation Authority community called CAFé. And now I'm gonna show a quick video demo. Of the management application. So as I said, I support both federated authentication and also we have a regular login screen. Here we have, in a given region in the map, it shows the networks, the local networks that have already given grades about. We can click in a specific access point and we can see his information. IP address, MAC address, position, the average QoE, and we also can access the reviews that the users made from these access points. So all the reviews of the comments. are provided. We can also change the network. So here we'll go to eduroam network, and it will change the access points. It was both networks at the same place, but different access points. We can also have the statistics from QoS parameters. And we can change the main statistics that the access points are presenting. So now we're going to see the round trip time statistics. So we have QoS RTT. Okay, this was our developer, Marcelo, that made this video for us. Okay, and I think that's it. Sorry. So this is what's under the Coliseu solution. We have an agent that is basically the mobile app. The agent, as I said, he gathers the information about the quality of experience and the quality of service using the Sonar tools, and forward this information to the gateway. The gateway, we use the gateway to give scalability for the solution. So as we grow the numbers of users and networks that are being rated, we can grow the name of gateway because he's the one who will forward the information from the agents to the management application, so that the management application didn't have to handle all these connections for all users to get the data from all of them. So the gateway is basically to forward this information from users to management application. The management application will gather all the information collected for all users and forwarded by the gateways, and will present in that interface that I just showed for you. An example of our infrastructure can be in this slide. We have the users and the gateways placed in distributed in a given network. In RP, we can put the gateways at the points of presence, for example. A management station that will be placed inside this network as well. And so the manager can access this web interface, this web application from anywhere in the network. So it's a very simple architecture. You just have to provide some gateways in order to give scalability for the solution. And this slide shows the technologies that we are using in Coliseu solution. That is, I want to point out actually the Shibboleth for user federated authentication, and also, as I said, the Sonar tools that we are using to make the measurements. The group didn't find any other work that implemented Sonar tools in mobiles applications. So I think it's one of the greatest contributions of this work is that implementation and giving the perspective of monitoring at the end user, at the edge of the network. So this year's roadmap includes the integration with MoneyP service. It's a service that is being implemented, a monitoring service that is being implemented at RNP, based in Sonar. So we are placing some measurement points at RNP's points of presence. And as I said, this service is concerned about monitoring the core elements at the network. So with integration with the Coliseu solution, we are now expanding this monitoring to the edge of the network so that we have a global view of network health. Another important guideline in our roadmap is to become the audit system of eduroam in RMP, so that we can, for example, we find a new spot that is spreading the eduroam SSID, and we don't know if it's a really eduroam node. We can check at the time that we see the new spot in the map, and you can check if it is a valid node. We have to use other tools to check that, or simply contact network administrator. But we can check and validate this node, or we can remove this node from Coliseu and eduroam database. So we are thinking about using this to audit the eduroam in Brazil. Another functionality is to provide network topology. So network administrators can see how many hops we have from the access points to network gateways. So what if we thought that are the main opportunities for the community? From the agent's perspective, we have the mobile application that anyone can download and use to rate and to analyze your network. But we are also providing an API so that the users can embed the personal tools to your own application. So if your institution, your network has already a monitoring application or an application that you want to embed monitoring tools, it can use our API. Sorry. And from the gateway perspective, now we can use any persona-based measurement points. So we just can, if you want to add your measurement point in your network, we can just contact us that we can do this manually. But in the future, we want to add this functionality to the management application so that the proper network administrator can now insert the MEPs of its network. And in the management application, as we are running in an experimental environment, we now only provide access through Brazilian federated authentication only for Brazilian community, and we have for other institutions have the account creation possibility. But in the future, we're going to be integrated with the EduGain community, so we can provide it federated access to international institutions. So the main reason we placed this paper here, this presentation, is to give the community the opportunity to give us feedbacks and comments in our work. So I now want to finish my presentation, and I'm open for questions. I thank you for the attention.
Thank you, Rafael. That's great. I was fortunate enough to see a live demo instead of a recorded one, and I was testing it in Ottawa, Canada, and I was testing our eduroam connection there back to the perf sonar servers in Brazil. And I was like, oh, the ping time is kind of low, which was great. Questions from the floor? Class, let me bring in the mic.
So I think this is really cool stuff. Let me start with that. In the review for your submission, I also asked the question, so I guess you guys have thought about this by now. How easy would it be to scale this kind of approach to global eduroam? And I guess a question to the eduroam operators in the audience would then, after your answer, would be, do you think this is something we as an eduroam community should seriously look at to get beyond the eduroam sucks or eduroam is the best thing since sliced bread type of Twitter comments?
I'm gonna ask the second first. I should think you should look at that. As RNP is the Brazilian responsible for eduroam, we first received their feedback and comments, and I think they are excited about it. And the first question is to make this gain in scale. We just have to put the gateways that I showed and the measurement points in the networks to spread MPs and gateways to gain scalability. So of course we didn't have load tests in the management application yet, but we have worked at the scalability, adding gateways and MPs, basically.
Just one quick follow-up comment. Long time ago, 10 years ago or so, when I was at SurfNet, we did this thing called the NREN detective, where we did measurements of fixed connections. And basically we just asked people, hey, would you be willing to host a system to do the measurements to, and basically this is the type of community that would happily provide these kind of boxes. So I think that would be relatively easy to do, to get all across the world measurement points.
Okay, and I think it's very easy because I see that most of NRENs are now using Persona tools, so it's basically, most of them have already measurement points, so it's kind of easy. Yeah. Maybe it's just the IP address.
So I think there's a hidden, not necessarily hidden, but behind the scenes Perf-Sonar infrastructure nodes that need to be sprinkled across the places from which you want to measure. Just as I'm going to hand over to Stefan. Out of curiosity, anyone in the audience already downloaded the app when they saw it on the screen, besides Stefan? Two other hands, 3, 4, yeah. Usual suspect.
Yeah, so one of the good things about this app is that it doesn't need any eduroam operations blessing to be used. You just download it and then you can find out how good or bad the eduroam network is. But when it comes to integrating it with the eduroam services, I see good potential for that. The one crucial point for me is we want to learn about these user experiences. So the app would need some kind of connection to the eduroam database to find out which hotspot is that, who is operating that hotspot, and if the user doesn't like the service, the message from the user should be transferred to the hotspot owner so he can do something about it. If that kind of integration comes in...
Yeah.
Yeah, no, we don't have a problem. It's not as accurate as you would like to have it, but yeah. But if you can, with a good probability, say probably you are right now at the University of X, then the University of X should be told about your experience. That's my opinion there.
Yeah.
Sorry. Sorry, I thought Miro was done.
Just a comment on that. We have now, we believe that network administrators of each eduroam site, it probably have something to analyze the network health. But as networks, eduroam service provider today, I think, unless he communicate with each network administrator, he can have a globally view of eduroam health. So I think it's maybe the other way around. They already know, but we didn't. We don't. Okay.
I'm going to go over here. Yeah.
Does your application take into account transient issues? Because, for example, if there's a lecture on and you've got 400 devices in a single room, then that can cause wireless issues. An hour later, those wireless issues are gone. So does the app take into account the transient nature of wireless problems?
I don't know if I understand the question. Is basically if the application counts the kind of traffic. Sorry.
It's more a case of wireless problems might only exist for a very short period of time. So if say 20 people use the application at a time when there is a wireless problem, and then an hour later that wireless problem no longer exists, does the data then remain showing that that area has issues, or does it time out?
Not yet, but as is an average, I think with the time passing, this average will correct the evidence. If you have certain events that only happen given moment, it will not interference all the measurements that we have along the time. Okay.
All right. Other questions? Yes, go ahead.
Hello, Alan Buxley, Loughborough University. Got a couple of questions and a query. First one is regarding the reporting. On iOS, there's certain things you cannot get access to in terms of the wireless API, and you can on Android, such as the SSID you're connected to, signal to noise ratio, etc. Are you looking into certain features to report those? Second point was, I did a couple of tests and it says that my TCP upload download is something like 9 megabits and 5 megabits, but when I look at the map, it's marked as red and poor, so there's something odd there. The last one was, how easy is it to set up the target per sonar node? Because if people connect to our wireless, if they're connecting to your target server, they're not actually testing our local quality of experience for wireless, they're testing the internet's current experience. So I'd like to have a local per sonar node, and if so, if they run the app on our network, can it auto-detect or auto-recognize that it should be talking to a local target, and we can just see that instead? Thank you.
Okay, the last one, you can see at the app that we can choose the measurement point. So we have just 3 right now. So, but the mobile app, it will choose the nearest one from you. So this one, I think, is one question. The other ones. Sorry.
The access to the wireless API, for example, the reporting right now is talking about the speed you got, etc. But I'd like to see the report for that hotspot to show what the client's RSSI was at the time, etc.
It's major scale problem in the. Okay, we're gonna look at that and see what is wrong. Thank you.
I'm going to make a quick plug about the perf sonar stuff, because there's a session on Thursday morning. Yes, the night after the gala, so please attend. But there's the next thing's going on with perf sonar, and I think that's dovetails with some of the perf sonar questions quite nicely. And I also think it shows that monitoring is not just at point in time or one point on the internet. It needs to be context sensitive to be where you are and in the time that you're at. And the questions that were asked are really around those. Oh, great, there's an assumption that this is there. And then now moving on to the really, the next stage of making it better, which is the kind of the interest that we want to have on the TF Mobility list and drive that conversation there. So we're I think we have some time. I don't know if are there any other questions for anyone here? Thomas?
A sort of follow-up to Scott's question. I wonder to what extent the data that you get from these measurements can be falsified by, let's say, human nature, because people will normally start testing things where they observe that something is going wrong, whereas with everything goes fine, they won't do the testing. Therefore, maybe your database will only collect the data from the bad moments, whereas nothing from the good ones.
Yeah, we have a lot of issues in that matter, but we are trying to gamify the application so that to engage users, but we don't know. Only when we start to have tests with users, we'll see if it'll work. And we also have another issue related to that is different users can have different views of what is good and what is not. Basically, if I'm a gamer, for example, I want a good latency, but if I just on the internet or I don't know, watch some YouTube video, I just have low requirements for the network. So how we're gonna balance that? It's a long work in big data analysis to separate this kind of information. So we are mainly concerning now into get this information, and then we have a lot of a great work to start to analyze and gather conclusions of this information.
I'm going to have one last question here, and then I have some short chair duties about telling you what's going on tonight. So last question, please.
Two questions, but I keep them separate. And to start with, I was just curious how much load this persona test, or actually all the test sequences, make on the network. Because if you have a situation where you have a large auditorium and everyone is doing the test, maybe you're bringing down the network just by doing the tests. Mm-hmm. So do you have any number or figure?
Yeah,
or
in this time we are not concerned about that because we are running experimental, but we have already announced in some event in a RNP event, and the network didn't crash. We have 400 people in the event, and some of them download the app, some of them not, but we have not worked on that yet.
You got your question. Okay. So, thank you very much for everyone. I think it's a great showing, and I think we had a great selection of speakers. So let's have a round of applause for our speakers, please. To help make TNC better, please review the session. So it's right at the root of the website. There's a feedback button in the top right that you can offer your feedback on. And later on this evening, the opening reception is at the pier at the conference venue here at 8 p.m. And don't forget your badges and tickets. Feedback, extra events. There's BOFN workshops this evening as well. And the gala dinner's on Wednesday. So with that, I think we'll close the session. And again, thank you very much and really appreciate it, and see you on the mobility list or on a video conference somewhere. Thank you.